research now.
Gather around, everyone, for John Kitchen, President Americas for IBI, Intuitive Business Intelligence. Thanks for doing this with us, John.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
So you've been, IBI's been up and running for about 8 months now. Give us a summary of what the business offers.
Well, in Intuitive Business Intelligence, what we do is we create data visualization tools.
Yeah.
So basically, anyone, no matter how unsophisticated, through their web browser can go in and look at the data that's important to them, create a dashboard view of it, so you can see charts, graphs, gauges, and dials, and see how the business is doing. So it can be anyone from a staff member all the way up to the executive boardroom. You'll be able to look, and without any kind of training, any kind of sophisticated IT experience or database experience, can look right there and say, how am I doing, and see it right there in a graphical view. And then if they see something that's wrong or want to drill down, just simply click on it and drill down to the underlying data and go from there. So it's very powerful, but more importantly, it's very easy to use. And that's one of the trends that we're actually going to talk about today.
Excellent. So many trends drive business decisions. What do you think, what are some of the internal, external technology trends that you think are driving businesses today?
Well, I think probably the biggest trend right now that's going on is the whole rise of something called big data. I think it was IDC who last year said that, in fact, between corporate and government databases, over 200 billion terabytes of data was stored. So the implications of that are staggering, that all of this data is being brought in. And so the question is, in terms of a technology trend, how do you go in, how do you aggregate this data? How do you separate the wheat from the chaff? How do you figure out what's important, what isn't important, what's relevant, what's not relevant? And then there's the whole side of it that, how much data, does these databases have on each one of us, and who actually controls that data? Who's responsible for that data? Who should have access to the data? I don't know about you guys, but I prefer not to have some hacker in Eastern Europe having all of my personal data and being able to do something with it. So, the whole trend here is not only this big accumulation of data, which comes from multiple sources, but how do you get it? How do you bring it in? How do you control it? How do you make sure there's security and move it forward? The next trend that's sort of closely allied to that is partly what my company does, is that, as a business, you need to go into this data and ask certain questions. You want to do some market research. You want to figure out what people's proclivities are, what have they done in the past, what are they likely to do. So how do you pull that data out, and how do you present it in a way that makes it comprehensible to people? There are a lot of tools out there that you can do some really deep dives into this data, but you almost need to be a neuroscientist or a real technologist to be able to get any value out of it. So one of the biggest technology trends is, how can we take this data and how can we make it usable for the average business person, the average researcher, who maybe doesn't have a PhD in neural nets or some kind of really advanced technology and building the software, who's maybe not an expert in building a data warehouse or a data mart, is not an expert in some of these really high-end tools. But how can we make it so we can plop a front end onto this data that people can look at it, understand the trends, be able to visually see them, and then be able to take action? And I think the biggest trend, and part of this is with the rise of the internet, everyone has used things like Google Analytics and these other tools, which make it really easy to do deep dives. You don't have to be an expert. It's all point and click. And I think for most of what's going on for business, that in fact, that's the trend now, that how do we make it easier? How do we make it more visual, which is how people work in real life? And how do you make it so people don't have to think? There was a great book a few years ago on building a website. It was called Don't Make Me Think. Well, I think much of technology now is aiming towards the same kind of goal, that how do you make people think about what the results they're looking at, but not think about the underlying technology. And that's the real trick moving forward right now.
Make it intuitive. Right. So a lot of that data is used to gather insights and win more business. Do you have some tips that you can share with us for winning new business?
Yeah, I think there's a couple real factors that have changed in terms of winning new business. I remember years ago, and I don't want to date myself, we used to walk into customers that we were pitching and say, oh, we'll never know your business as well as you do, but we'll know the right questions to ask, and yada, yada, yada. And now I think that if you walk and say, oh, we'll never know the business as well as you do, that you're killing yourself right there. With the rise of the internet, that anyone who doesn't do the research ahead of time to find out about the business you're pitching, to be able to at least show that you have some detailed knowledge of it is crazy. I mean, what you do may not be, you may not need to know everything, but you need to go in and show some familiarity with what they're doing, what their goals are, what the accomplishments are, what their brand is. Yeah. Because with the internet, it's all there for you to do, and they want to know that you've done the research and you're a quick learner. Because all of us right now move at the speed of light. The internet has made the velocity of learning much faster now. So if you can at least go in and show that you're really good at picking up things really quickly, you're going to get killed. And that goes to my second, I think, major point about getting new business, is the ability to go in and talk about all the new trends, all the new things that are happening, even to the point of things that are futures, and be able to relate it to their business. Right. Now, the truth is that 99% of the time, they're not going to do any of this stuff. They probably aren't going to ever take advantage of it. But the fact that you know about it gives you a certain amount of credibility. Right. And they have the comfort level that you have the knowledge that you're trying to think into the future about what's going to happen.
Right. So be well informed stepping into a meeting.
Exactly.
Yep. So there's a lot of buzzwords that fly around the business. Do you have one? What's your most annoying buzzword in the business?
Personally, I think the most annoying buzzword is also the one that we all hear so much about, which is cloud computing.
Cloud computing?
Cloud computing. And everything's, we have the iCloud, and, this is in the cloud, the Microsoft cloud, and all that sort of stuff. Well, again, for those of us who've been around for a while, this is just old, client-server computing. I mean, this whole concept of, in fact, mainframes were in fact cloud computing. You had the mainframe in the glass house, and then people had these terminals which logged into it, so it's all centralized computing that people logged into. Well, yes, now there's some nice things on top of it. Right. Now it's the internet, and you can get it from wireless, so there's some technologies that are surrounding it that have made it a little bit sexier and targeted up, made it a little bit different. But it's the same old concept of, your data resides right here, and then you have different avenues to get in at it. So when people say, oh, cloud computing is something new, I sagely nod my head and say, of course it is, and talk about it, but it's just the same old, exactly.
So you've been doing this for a while. What are the most interesting changes that you've seen in consumer behavior over the past year or two?
I think the biggest change is almost a societal one, in that the velocity of how people make decisions, how they read up about things, everything has increased so tremendously. I was talking with someone the other day, and we were talking about there was a time, for example, when people would be willing to take surveys. And when I say a while ago, maybe it was a year ago. I mean, things are so much faster now. Now when people are on the web, it's like anything that slows down what they're trying to accomplish or gets in the way of what they're trying to accomplish is annoying. Mm-hmm. Another thing in terms of the velocity of consumers that I see is that with the rise of things like Groupon and other kinds of almost immediate discounting and couponing, that it used to be, well, let's get the circular and see what's on sale next week, or in 3 weeks this car is going to go on sale. Well, it turns out that people don't think that far in advance now. We all live in the now. We all live in the now because of the internet. So as marketers, we have to figure out, how do we get the discounts? How do we get the buying incentives in front of the person at the very time that they plan to buy? Because if you don't get it in front of them right now when they want to buy, then they're going to forget about you. So it's the whole consumer behavior is just so much more, it's gotten so much faster and so much more impatient that you've got to be there right at the right time. And it's interesting that at the South by Southwest conference last week, the winner was an application that in fact is the one where, they go to your, I think it was Highlight is the name of it.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's the one.
But the whole idea that, that you walk around your cell phone, you have a GPS on, their servers can track you, know where you are, and then be able to connect you with people who you're friends with, and then also be able to connect you with complete strangers who may have similar likes and dislikes. Well, in marketing, what's going to happen is sooner or later, you're going to be connected with, you're going to be walking down the street, and let's say there's an Abercrombie & Fitch there. As you walk by that store, you're going to get something on your smartphone that says, oh, there's a sale on right now on new shirts because we know you need one. I mean, that's going to happen. Now, the implications of that, who controls the data, what can they give it to you, how that can happen. As my wife said to me the other day, well, this is another boon to stalkers to be able to have this kind of technology, which is kind of terrifying. But there's a whole, philosophical issues aside, it's coming. I mean, real-time marketing message based on where you are is going to happen.
It's inevitable. So let's get to know you a little bit. Now I know you don't have a Twitter account. But if you did have one and you could follow anyone...
But I do have a Twitter, but like all people who get into social media, that it goes in waves that you get excited about it, you use it, and then you sort of lose interest in it and move on to the next thing. But but I know your question, and if I did have one, the person that I would be fascinated to follow would be Winston Churchill, which I know is probably bizarre, but you think about it, Winston Churchill not only was one of the 20th century's greatest statesmen, a fabulous historian, but also had one of the wickedest wits ever. I mean, you think about things that he said just off the cuff, like, this is a guy who was very modest, and he has a great deal to be modest about. I mean, and if you think about some of the Twitter exchanges he got involved in, what's that great story where some woman says, Winston, if you're my husband, I'd put poison in your tea, and he quickly responded, if you were my wife, I'd drink it. Well, I could just imagine sort of the Twitter things, and him going back and forth on it would be tremendously amusing.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much
for being on stage with us. Oh, this is a pleasure, Sadia. I really enjoyed it.